Tonight, our journey takes us across the shifting sands of time to stand beneath the eternal shadow of the Great Pyramids of Giza. But first, come in from the cold, dark night. Close the heavy oak door behind you. You are safe now, wrapped in the warmth of the library. The rain outside cannot touch you here. The volume for this tale is already waiting on the desk, bound in rough, sun-baked leather that smells of spice and desert dust. I have lit the candle. Let us turn the heavy page. Together, our story begins. Let us step into the desert. It is not merely moving air here on the plateau. It is a carrier of memories, ancient and incredibly deep. Here, standing on the darkened sands of Giza, the wind has a distinct voice. It is a low, persistent murmur that brushes against your skin, cool and wonderfully dry, washing away the intense sun-baked heat of the afternoon. It smells faintly of pulverized limestone, of dry, ageless earth, and the vast, unending desert that stretches out endlessly to the west. If you close your eyes, the modern world begins to dissolve. The wind here has blown over these same stones for more than 4,500 years. It whipped around the workers who first dragged the massive blocks into place. It cooled the brows of priests who walked these causeways in solemn procession. It howled through the nights when tomb robbers chipped away at sealed entrances in frantic secrecy. It is the same wind. It touches your face now, just as it touched theirs. Let us lower our gaze to the ground beneath us. In the pale, diffused starlight, the sand appears almost colourless, a vast ocean of muted greys and soft silvers, undulating like the quiet waves of a frozen sea. If you were to kneel, slowly, gently, and press your open palm into its surface, you would feel the surprising chill it holds at midnight. Go ahead, gather a handful. Feel the gentle, granular abrasion as thousands of tiny, crystalline grains slip through your loosened fingers, like time itself running out. Listen to the soft, sibilant hiss they make as they rejoin the dunes, a sound like silk being dragged over stone. These are not just grains of indifferent rock. They are the pulverized remnants of history, trodden upon by countless generations. Every grain might once have been part of a magnificent temple wall, or a pharaoh's walkway, now returned to its most elemental form by the relentless patience of the ions. There is a heaviness to the air here, a density that has nothing to do with humidity. It is the weight of silence. When you stand near the base of the Great Pyramid at this hour, the silence is not merely an absence of sound. It is a presence. It is a massive, monolithic thing that leans against you. The colossal stone blocks, stacked toward the heavens, seem to absorb all noise, swallowing the echoes of the present day and leaving only this profound, vibrating stillness. It is a silence that demands reverence. Now, turn your head slowly toward the east. There, just beyond the silent, looming, triangular shadows of the monuments, lies another world entirely. The sprawling city of Cairo glows on the horizon like a bed of restless, unending embers. It is a chaotic tapestry of amber streetlights, harsh white neons, and the blinking red eyes of distant radio towers. It pulses, It shimmers with a nervous, frantic energy. From this vantage point, protected by the ancient dark of the plateau, the roar of that megacity, the horns, the engines, the millions of lives intertwined in its frantic pace, is reduced to nothing more than a breathless hum. It is a vibration barely felt in the soles of your feet, a distant reminder of a rushing world that feels impossibly far away from this sacred ground. It is the sound of the modern moment, fleeting and urgent, contrasting sharply with the eternal patience of the stone behind you. The city lights try to invade the plateau, casting long, strange orange hues against the eastern faces of the pyramids. But they do not penetrate far. The shadows cast by Khufu's great mountain of stone are incredibly deep, pools of absolute velvety blackness where the modern world cannot reach. Standing here, wrapped in the cool desert shawl of the night, separated from that glowing city by just a few miles of sand and history, you are no longer fully in the 21st century. You are suspended in a breathless pause, a liminal space between the living and the long dead. You are waiting, just as these stones have waited for over 1.5 million nights, for the sun to rise again over the river Nile. As your eyes adjust to this profound, heavy darkness, the true shapes of the plateau begin to manifest against the night sky. They do not appear suddenly, rather they seem to rise up from the desert floor, coalescing out of the shadows until they dominate the entire western horizon. The 3 Great Pyramids. In this light, they are not the golden monuments of tourist brochures. They are something far older, far more primal. They are vast triangular voids of absolute blackness, cutting sharp geometric holes into the fabric of the star-dusted sky. They stand as the silent, eternal watchmen of this necropolis. The moon, now rising higher, begins to cast its pale, silvery net over them. It is a cold light, unforgiving and stark, and it changes them. It strips away the warmth of the desert sun and leaves them looking like mountains of frozen ash. Let us move closer in our mind's eye. Let us drift across the intervening sands, slowly, steadily, toward the base of the greatest of them, the horizon of Khufu. As we approach, the perfect, sharp silhouette begins to break down. What looked like a smooth, unbroken line from a distance reveals itself to be a rugged, jagged staircase ascending to the heavens. The moonlight catches the edges of these massive tiers, creating a complex, shifting tapestry of blinding white highlights and impenetrable inky shadows. It looks less like a man-made structure now and more like a raw geological feature, a rigid mountain forced from the earth by some colossal subterranean pressure. Drifting closer still, the sheer, overwhelming immensity of it begins to press down on you. The sense of scale here is frightening. You tilt your head back, craning your neck until it aches, trying to find the summit. But the top is impossibly far away. It seems to sway slightly against the backdrop of slowly turning stars, a dizzying optical illusion that makes you feel unsteady on your feet. You realize with a sudden, humbling clarity how incredibly small you are, a mere speck of transient life standing before a mountain of eternal stone. Now we are right at the base. The massive blocks of core masonry tower directly above us. In the moonlight, you can see the texture of these stones. They are not smooth. They are deeply pitted, scarred by 50 centuries of wind and blowing sand. They look like the rough, weathered hide of some slumbering leviathan. Each individual block is a monolith in its own right, taller than a man, heavier than imagination. You can see the faint, irregular gaps between them where the mortar has long since turned to dust. Dark fissures where small desert creatures might make their dens, secure in the most impregnable fortress on earth. Reach out again. Press your hand against the nearest block. It is incredibly cold now, having shed every ounce of the day's burning heat into the clear night air. It feels rough, abrasive, like monumental sandpaper. If you hold your breath and listen, really listen, you might hear the wind whistling softly as it is forced through the narrow canyons between these colossal stones. It is a lonely, mournful sound, a low flute note played by the desert itself. These are the guardians. They have watched the Nile shift its course. They have seen conquerors come with spears, then muskets, then tanks, and they have watched them all leave. They stand here tonight, under the same indifferent moon, totally unmoved by the passage of time, waiting patiently for the centuries to keep rolling by. Take a slow, deep breath with me now. Inhale the cool, dry air of the desert night. Hold it for a moment. Let it fill your lungs, grounding you, steadying you. And now, slowly, gently, exhale. Let the tension of your day, the worries of your world, drift away from you like smoke on the breeze. You do not need them here. They belong to a time that does not yet exist. With every breath you take, feel yourself becoming lighter, untethered from the present moment. We are going to leave this modern plateau behind. We are going to leave the glowing lights of Cairo, the distant hum of engines, the sharp edges of today. Imagine a fog beginning to rise from the sands around your feet. It is not a fog of water, but a fog of time. It is thick and opalescent, swirling softly, rising higher and higher until it obscures the jagged outlines of the pyramids, until it softens the harsh glare of the moon. The world is turning white, quiet, and still. We are walking backward now, step by step, year by year, century by century. Feel the years peeling away like layers of old dry parchment. The steel and glass of the modern cities dissolve into dust. The roar of airplanes fades into the screech of hawks. The languages you know unravel into older, deeper tongues. 500 years pass in a heartbeat, 1,000, 2,000. We are drifting deeper into the mist. The air is changing. It smells different now, richer, more fertile, carrying the heavy, sweet scent of river mud and blooming lotus flowers and the sharp tang of freshly cut limestone. 3,000 years. 4,000. The fog begins to thin. The shapes around us are reforming, but they are different now. The silence of the ruins is being replaced by a low rhythmic sound. It is the sound of 1,000 copper chisels striking stone, a heartbeat that echoes across the valley. 500 more years. We have arrived. Open your eyes. The night is gone. The blinding, glorious sun of the old kingdom is blazing overhead. We are standing on the same plateau, but it is alive. It is white and dazzling. We have crossed the great ocean of time, and we are here in the vibrant, bustling, sacred land of the living pharaohs. Before the first stone was ever laid, before the first surveyor's rope was ever stretched taut across the sand, this place was a masterpiece of pure, untamed geology. Imagine the plateau as it was then, a raw, uplifted table of limestone, thrust upward from the desert floor by ancient, unimaginable forces deep within the earth. It stood high above the lush green ribbon of the Nile Valley, a stark, blindingly white promontory, jutting into the endless blue of the sky. It was a lonely place, a place of fierce, uncompromising beauty. The sun here did not just shine, it struck the earth with physical force. It beat down upon the jagged crust of nummulitic limestone, rock composed of billions of tiny fossilized sea creatures, remnants of a prehistoric ocean that once covered all of this land. Under the midday glare, the ground was too bright to look at directly. It shimmered and danced in the heat haze, a vast, wavering expanse of bleached bone white and pale ochre. There were no straight lines here yet, no perfect angles. The landscape was rugged, sculpted only by the relentless, scouring wind that blew in from the western desert. Over millions of years, this wind, carrying its abrasive cargo of sand, had carved the bedrock into strange, undulating shapes. It had polished some surfaces until they gleamed like rough marble, and pitted others into intricate honeycombs of shadow. Deep ravines, cut by rare torrential flash floods that occurred perhaps once in a generation, scarred the edges of the plateau. These wadis were dry, silent places, their floors littered with shattered flints that had lain undisturbed since the Stone Age. Life here was sparse, tenacious, and hard. A solitary scorpion might skitter from the shade of one rock to another, its carapace glistening like dark obsidian. A horned viper, the colour of dust, might lie coiled in a shallow depression, perfectly camouflaged, waiting with infinite reptilian patience for a wayward desert mouse. High above, in the breathless blue vault of the heavens, vultures would circle on immense motionless wings, their sharp eyes scanning the barren expanse for any sign of weakness. The only sounds were primordial ones, the endless sibilant hiss of sand grains flowing over rock, the sudden sharp crack of a stone splitting in the intense heat of the afternoon, the lonely, haunting cry of a jackal echoing under the cold light of the moon. It was a clean slate, a massive, sprawling canvas of rock and sky, waiting in monumental silence for the hand of man to reshape it into immortality. It was a sacred space not yet consecrated, a chaotic, beautiful wilderness poised on the very brink of history. Far below that high, sun-baked plateau, down in the valley, life moved to a different rhythm entirely. It was a rhythm dictated not by the sun, but by the water, the Nile. It was not just a river to them. It was the bloodstream of the entire world, the great, mysterious god Hapai, who brought life from the unknown south. And every year, with the unerring certainty of the rising stars, the miracle would happen. It began slowly, in the deepest heat of the summer, when the land was parched and cracked like old pottery. Word would come from the southern outposts. The river was rising. At first it was just a change in the colour of the water. The clear, lazy blue would turn turbid, then a rich reddish brown, heavy with the precious silt washed down from the distant Ethiopian highlands. The current would quicken, swirling with new energy, carrying clumps of green papyrus torn from faraway marshes. Then the waters would breach the banks. It was not a violent, destructive flood, but a slow, majestic embrace. Day by day, inch by inch, the water would creep outward, swallowing the dusty fields, filling the irrigation canals surrounding the villages which stood on higher ground like little islands in a vast, shimmering inland sea. The air would change completely. The dry, dusty heat of the desert would be replaced by a thick, humid heaviness. The scent of the world became rich and overwhelming, the smell of wet earth, of decaying vegetation, of fish, and of rampant explosive life. This was the season of Achet, the inundation. For the farmers, it was a time of enforced rest from the fields. The land was under water. There was no ploughing to be done, no sowing, no harvesting. The great agricultural machine of Egypt ground to a halt, waiting for the waters to recede and leave behind their gift of fresh, fertile black mud. It was in this pause, this great annual breath held by the land, that the Pharaoh could command the labor of his people. Tens of thousands of men who would otherwise be tending their crops were suddenly available. They were not slaves, driven by whips, but peasant farmers, conscripted by the rhythm of their own river to serve their god-king during the months when their fields lay sleeping under the flood. The Nile, now swollen to miles in width, became a gigantic liquid highway. It reached right up to the very foot of the Giza Plateau. Great barges heavy with granite from Aswan, 1,000 miles to the south, or fine white limestone from Tura across the valley, could float effortlessly right up to the construction site. The water did the heavy lifting. The pulse of the river became the pulse of the magnificent project, starting to rise on the rocky heights above. The flood dictated everything: the movement of stone, the movement of men, the very tempo of creation itself. High in his palace at Memphis, surrounded by walls painted with vibrant scenes of marshes and teeming life, Pharaoh Khufu did not sleep well. His dreams were not filled with the common anxieties of men, of wars or famines or petty betrayals. His dreams were vast, architectural, and terrifyingly lucid. They were dreams of eternity. He was a god on earth, yes, the living Horus. His word was absolute law. His every gesture commanded legions. Yet he knew with a cold, gnawing certainty that visited him in the deepest hours of the night that his mortal vessel was fragile. It would wither. It would fail. The dream that drove him was not born of vanity, though many would later say it was. It was born of a desperate, sacred need for order, for Ma'at. In the Egyptian mind, death was not an end, but a perilous transition. It was a chaotic, dangerous journey through a netherworld filled with demons and trials, a journey that required a secure anchor in the physical world to be successful. If the king's body was destroyed, if his tomb was violated, the cosmic order itself might unravel. The sun might fail to rise, the Nile might fail to flood. Khufu dreamed of a machine, not a machine of gears and levers, but a machine of stone, geometric and perfect, a structure so massive, so absolutely inviolable, that it would act as a permanent tether between the earth and the imperishable stars. He saw it in his mind's eye, rising above the chaos of the shifting desert sands. It had to be a perfect pyramid, a Benben stone made mountainous. Its sides had to be smooth, angled precisely to mimic the rays of the sun as they broke through the clouds, offering a solid ramp for his soul to ascend to the heavens and join his father Ra in the solar boat of millions of years. It was not about boasting to future generations. It was about survival. He dreamed of absolute precision. In a world of shifting mud brick and mutable flesh, he needed something immutable. He needed angles that would never waver, cardinal alignments that would remain true long after the pole star itself had drifted from its station. This vision weighed heavily upon him. It was a crushing responsibility. He had to bankrupt his kingdom, if necessary, to secure the eternal stability of the universe. He had to turn the entire might of Egypt, every grain of wheat, every ounce of copper, every strong back and clever mind, toward this single colossal goal. He would wake before dawn, sweating. The vision of that perfect shining white mountain burned into his retinas, blotting out the real world around him. He knew then that it must be built. It was not a choice. It was a cosmic necessity. Before the sun has even thought of cresting the eastern horizon, while the sky is still a deep bruised indigo, Hemiunu is awake. The palace is quiet at this hour, held in a suspended state of breathless anticipation. The air in his chambers is cool, almost sharp, carrying the residual chill of the desert night that seeps even through thick mud brick walls. It is a clean stillness, broken only by the soft, rhythmic swish-swish of a servant's linen tunic as they move about invisibly in the shadows. He sits on a low stool of polished ebony, his heavy, fleshy frame still lethargic with sleep. He is a big man, Hemiunu. His corpulence is not a sign of indulgence, but of status, of power, of a mind that is too valuable to be wasted on physical toil. A servant approaches, silent as a wraith, holding a small alabaster bowl. Warm water scented with oils of cedar and bitter almond is gently sponged over his face, his neck, his broad shoulders. The warmth is a shocking, pleasant contrast to the cool air. He closes his eyes, letting the sensation ground him, washing away the remnants of his own complex dreams. Next comes the scent that defines his mornings, frankincense. A small brazier of charcoal is brought in, glowing softly orange in the dim light. A pinch of the precious milky resin is dropped onto the coals. Immediately, a thin plume of blue-grey smoke curls upward, unfurling like a spectral snake. The aroma hits him, sharp, citrusy, resinous, and profoundly sacred. It is the smell of temples, the smell of the gods, the smell of authority. It clears his head instantly, sharpening his thoughts like a whetstone against a copper blade. He stands, and the dressing begins. Servants drape him in fine, starched white linen. The fabric is cool and crisp against his skin. It is pleated with astonishing precision, every fold a testament to the order he must uphold. A broad collar of faience beads, turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian is placed around his neck. It is heavy, a physical weight that settles onto his collarbones, reminding him of the burden he carries. He is the vizier, the one who is at the door. He is the eyes and ears of Pharaoh, the supreme architect, the man upon whose shoulders the entire impossible project rests. He steps out onto the terrace of his villa. The city of Memphis is spread out below him, still sleeping under a blanket of low-lying mist from the river. But his eyes do not look down. They look west, across the river, toward the high plateau. Even in the pre-dawn gloom, he can see it. The great scars in the earth where they have begun to level the bedrock. The flickering torches of the night shift surveyors, looking like tiny captive fireflies against the vast darkness of the escarpment. The work never truly stops. It is a living beast that he must constantly feed with men, with stone, with bread, with beer. He takes a deep breath of the incense-laden air, squares his heavy shoulders, and prepares to command the impossible for yet another day. The vizier's office is not a place of grand thrones, but of grand ideas. It is a room dominated by shelves, wooden pigeonholes stacked high with countless scrolls, the accumulated knowledge and bureaucracy of the entire kingdom. He sits at a wide, low table made of imported cedar, its surface polished to a deep, reddish sheen by years of use. Before him lies the heart of the project, the plans. Listen to the sound as he unrolls a fresh sheet of papyrus. It is a crisp, dry, crackling sound, like walking on autumn leaves. The papyrus is new, smelling faintly of the marsh reeds from which it was made, layered and hammered into a smooth, yellowish-white surface. It is a blank canvas, terrifying in its emptiness, waiting for him to impose order upon it. He picks up his instrument. It is not a heavy chisel, but a delicate thing, a slender reed pen, its tip chewed carefully into a fine, fibrous brush. He dips it into a small palette of black ink, a mixture of soot from cooking pots and gum arabic to bind it. He pauses for a moment, his hand hovering over the virgin surface of the papyrus. In this moment, the Great Pyramid exists only in his mind, a perfect, weightless abstraction of pure geometry. Then he touches the reed to the sheet. The first line is drawn. It is a whisper of sound, a soft, scratchy friction as the fibers of the reed drag across the fibers of the papyrus. It is perfectly straight, guided by a wooden ruler. This single black line represents a wall that will one day be 500 feet long and composed of stones weighing as much as elephants. He draws another line, intersecting the first at a precise right angle. Then another. A square begins to form on the page. It is small, barely the width of his hand, yet it represents 13 acres of solid rock base. He adds notations in hieratic script, the swift cursive shorthand of the scribes. The symbols flow from his pen, cryptic and dense, measurements in cubits, palms, and fingers, calculations of volume, estimates of the number of men needed for quarrying. Sometimes he switches to red ink made from finely ground ochre to mark key reference points or structural stresses. The plan becomes a complex web of black and red, a coded map of the future. More scrolls are unrolled. Some show the internal chambers, delicate corridors snaking through solid masses of sketch stone. Others are logistical lists, tallies of copper tools delivered, expected arrivals of grain barges, rosters of workmen from the Delta provinces. The rustle of papyrus is constant in this room. It is the sound of the intellectual foundation being laid, long before the physical one. Every massive stone that will ever be moved is first moved here, in miniature, with a flick of a reed brush and a scratch of dried ink. By mid-morning, Hemiunu is on the plateau itself. He has left the cool sanctuary of his office and is now standing in the full blazing glare of the sun. The heat here is different from the valley. It is fierce, direct, rebounding off the white limestone underfoot with dazzling intensity. He squints against the glare, his eyes scanning the rugged terrain. He is not alone, but he might as well be. A small retinue of surveyors and scribes follows at a respectful distance, silent, waiting for his judgment. He walks slowly, deliberately. His sandaled feet crunch softly on the loose layer of chert pebbles and wind-blown sand that covers the bedrock. He is testing the ground, not just with his eyes, but with his entire being. He stops at a promising rise in the plateau. Slowly, heavily, he kneels down. The retinue holds its breath. He places both palms flat against the warm rock. He closes his eyes again, ignoring the sun beating down on his shaven head. He is feeling for vibrations, for weaknesses, for hidden fissures deep below the surface. This rock must bear a weight that no rock on earth has ever borne before. 6 million tons of stone. If it has a fault line, a hidden cavern, a soft vein of clay, the entire structure could crack and collapse centuries from now. He runs his rough, broad fingers over the limestone. It is a good stone here, nummulitic limestone. He can feel the tiny disc-shaped fossils embedded in it, millions of little stony coins that give the rock its strength and gritty texture. It is solid, compact, and ancient. It feels dense and unforgiving under his hand. He taps it with a small copper mallet he carries at his belt. Tink, tink, tink. The sound is high, clear, and sharp. It does not sound hollow. It sings with the solidity of the deep earth. He stands up, brushing the white dust from his palms. He looks north, aligning himself with the pole star that is invisible in the daylight, but whose position he knows by heart. He looks east, toward the river valley that will feed this project. He looks south, where his father's and grandfather's pyramids stand at Sneferu's necropolis, smaller trial runs for this ultimate masterpiece. He nods once, a barely perceptible movement of his heavy chin. One of the scribes immediately rushes forward, reed pen poised over a clay tablet. Hemiunu points to the spot where he just knelt. "Here," he says, his voice a low rumble that seems to come from the rock itself. "We begin here. Mark the northeast corner. The decision is made. The center of the world has just been fixed. Listen. It is not noise, it is music. It is the sound that defines every waking hour, from the moment the sun spills its first gold onto the eastern horizon to the moment it sinks behind the western desert. It is the heartbeat of construction, a relentless rhythmic pulse that echoes off the sheer walls of the quarry. Tink, 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 tink. Multiply that single sound by 1,000, by 3,000. It becomes a physical vibration in the air, thick and all-encompassing. It is the sound of copper striking limestone. It is duller than the ring of iron would be, less resonant. It is a thudding, stubborn sound. Copper is a soft metal, and the stone is hard. This is a battle of attrition, won not by brute force, but by pure, unrelenting repetition. Let us walk down into the quarry pit. The air here is thick with dust. It hangs in choking white clouds, coating everything, men, tools, rock faces, in a layer of fine, chalky powder. They all look like ghosts, white men working in a white world. The quarrymen crouch in narrow trenches cut around each emerging block. They work in teams, shoulder to shoulder, their movements perfectly synchronized. One man holds the chisel, a short, thick bar of greenish copper, its tip blunted from constant use. Another man holds the wooden mallet, a heavy lump of acacia wood, polished smooth by years of gripping. Strike, turn, strike, turn. The rhythm is hypnotic. It is not chaotic, it has a cadence. It is the cadence of human breath, the tempo of a heartbeat under strain. The men often chant low, guttural songs that give the work a meter, helping them strike in unison. These songs have no real words, just sounds that carry through the canyons of stone, mingling with the dust. Every hour or so, the rhythm is broken by a different sound, a sharp, sizzling hiss. It is the water boys. They run between the rows of working men carrying clay jars, not for drinking, but for the chisels. They pour water over the superheated copper, and it steams instantly, cooling the metal before it becomes too soft to cut. The smell of wet, hot stone mixes with the smell of sweat and dust, and then, suddenly, a mightier sound breaks through the symphony of tapping. Crack! A deep, resonant boom like a cannon shot. A massive block of limestone weighing 2.5 tons has finally split free from the bedrock. For a moment there is silence as the men straighten their aching backs, looking at their handiwork. But the silence lasts only a second. An overseer shouts, pointing to the next section of the wall. The chisels are raised again. The rhythm returns. Tink, tink, tink. The symphony continues. Here, in the heart of the work, the human body is the primary tool. Look closely at the men. They are not the emaciated slaves of popular myth. They are strong, thick-limbed farmers, their bodies honed by years of tilling the heavy black soil of the Nile Valley. Now those same muscles are turned to a different task. Their skin, normally a rich, warm brown, is completely obscured. They are coated in a thick paste of sweat and fine white limestone dust. It clings to them like a second skin, cracking around their eyes and mouths when they grimace with effort. Watch a team hauling a sledge. 20 men are harnessed to thick ropes made of twisted papyrus fibers. The ropes are rough, they bite into flesh. But these men do not flinch. They lean forward, their bodies at an acute angle to the ground, digging their toes into the packed earth of the ramp. Heave. The muscles in their calves bunch into hard knots. Their thighs tremble slightly with the immense strain. Tendons stand out on their necks like taut steel cables. You can hear their collective breath, a sharp intake of air through clenched teeth, followed by a forceful, explosive exhale as they throw their entire weight against the inertia of the stone. Ho! The sledge inches forward, just a few feet, the wooden runners groan against the wetted mud of the track. It is a world of intense, focused sensation, the stinging salt of sweat running into their eyes, blurring their vision until the world is just a hazy white path ahead. The raw, burning heat in their shoulders, the rough texture of the ropes against calloused palms. Yet there is a strange lack of overwhelming suffering. There is exhaustion, yes, bone-deep, mind-numbing weariness, but there is also a rhythm to it, a shared purpose. They are fed better here than in their villages. Thick loaves of emmer wheat bread, onions, dried fish, and endless jars of thick, nourishing beer that dulls the aches and keeps their spirits up. When a team pauses, panting heavily, they do not collapse in despair. They pour water over their heads, wiping the mud from their faces. They exchange brief, winded jokes. They look up at the mountain of stone they are building, watching it rise tier by tier, knowing that their own sweat is the mortar binding it all together. It is hard, brutal work, but it is work done for a god, and that knowledge gives their straining muscles a strength beyond mere mortal endurance. Sometimes brute force is not enough. Sometimes you need patience and the subtle, irresistible power of nature itself. Come away from the noisy line of chisels, walk to a quieter corner of the quarry where a different kind of magic is at work. Here the workers have already cut deep, narrow slots into the face of the limestone bedrock. They have followed the natural fault lines of the stone, reading the rock like a scribe reads a scroll. Into these slots they have driven dry wooden wedges. They are simple things, chunks of sycamore or acacia wood, hammered tightly into the cracks. They look innocuous, harmless. But now, watch. A worker approaches with a dripping water skin. Slowly, carefully, he pours water over the wooden wedges. He does not rush. He ensures every piece of wood is thoroughly soaked, and then he walks away. Nothing happens at first. The wood just looks wet, but deep inside the fibers of the timber, a powerful physical reaction is beginning. As the dry wood drinks up the water, its cells begin to expand. They swell, pushing outward with a slow, terrifying force. It is a silent process. You could sit here for hours and see no movement. It is the torture of the stone. The pressure builds invisibly, immensely, inside the very heart of the rock. Tons of pressure exerted outwards from within the crack. You might have to wait all night. You might be sitting under the stars, listening to the distant jackals when it finally happens. Crack! It is a startling, violent sound in the quiet night. The sheer, unrelenting force of the swelling wood has finally overcome the tensile strength of the limestone. A perfect, clean fissure has opened up, running straight and true from one wedge to the next. A multi-ton block, cut without a single stroke of a hammer in its final moments, now lies separated from the mother rock, ready to be dragged away. It is a victory of ingenuity over raw mass, a testament to understanding the quiet, hidden powers of the natural world. It begins with a rumour in the water. Long before the banks are breached, the Nile tells you that change is coming. If you stand by the river's edge in the height of summer, when the heat is a physical weight pressing down on the cracked earth, you can see it. The water, usually a lazy, translucent ribbon of green-blue, begins to thicken. It turns a murky, opaque grey first. Then, day by day, it deepens into a rich, reddish brown. It is the colour of blood mixed with earth. This is the gift of the distant south. It is the fertile silt stripped from the Ethiopian highlands by monsoon rains thousands of miles away, now carried north in a majestic, swirling suspension. The current quickens. The placid surface of the river breaks into eddies and whirls. You can hear it now, a deeper, more urgent rushing sound as it flows past the reeds. Sticks, clumps of unfamiliar purple flowers, sometimes even the bloated carcass of a strange, dark-skinned animal not seen in these parts. All these flotsam drift past, messengers from a mysterious, far-off land. Every morning the priests go down to the Nilometers, stone staircases descending into the river. They watch the water creep up the steps, one by one. They mark the level on plastered walls, comparing it to the ancient records. "It is a good year," they whisper to each other, relief washing over them like the coming flood itself. Happy is generous. The farmers stand on their parched fields, shading their eyes against the sun, watching the life-giving brown snake grow fatter and wider in its bed. They feel the anticipation in the very air, a humid, electric charge that promises the end of the dry season and the rebirth of their world. The great waiting is almost over. Across the valley, on the eastern bank, lie the great limestone caves of Tura. This is where the snow-white casing stones are born, the stones that will make Khufu's mountains shine like a second sun. The scene at the loading docks is a ballet of unimaginable weight. The river has risen now, its waters lapping high against the purpose-built quays. Enormous wooden barges, made of thick cedar planks imported from Byblos, bob heavily in the current. They are massive, flat-bottomed vessels, their decks reinforced to bear crushing loads. A single block of Tura limestone is being moved. It is a pristine, dazzlingly white cube, meticulously dressed by master masons until its surface is as smooth as polished ivory. It weighs 15 tons. It rests on a wooden sledge. Dozens of men are harnessed to it, but here there is no frantic whipping, no hurried shouting. The margin for error is 0. A slip, a sudden lurch, and the stone could crush a dozen men or smash through the hull of the barge, sinking it instantly. Everything moves in slow motion. The foreman signals with silent hand gestures. The men heave just an inch at a time. Creak, pause, creak, pause. Under the runners of the sledge, workers pour a steady stream of slick, viscous mud to act as lubricant. Others place round wooden rollers, essentially mobile wheels, inching them under the front of the sledge as it moves forward. The barge groans as it takes the weight. It dips lower into the brown water, straining against its thick mooring ropes. The wood protests, sounding like the deep growl of a large animal. Ballast stones are carefully shifted on the deck to keep the vessel perfectly level. It is a delicate operation of counterbalancing, a high-stakes game played with gargantuan pieces. Finally, the block is settled in the centre of the deck. The ropes go slack. The men exhale, wiping sweat from their brows. One down, thousands more to go. The barge, now sitting terrifyingly low in the water, is ready for its perilous journey across the swollen currents of the flood. The journey across the flooded valley is best made at night. The heat of the day has dissipated, leaving the air cool and heavy with moisture. The wind has died down, leaving the immense swollen expanse of the Nile smooth as polished obsidian. We are on one of the great stone barges now, drifting silently westward. Look up. The sky is not just above you, it is below you too. The water is so still that it perfectly mirrors the heavens. You are floating through a universe of stars. The Milky Way is a brilliant, glowing ribbon of diamond dust that seems to wrap entirely around you. You feel suspended in a cosmic void, untethered from the earth. There is no sound of oars. The current here is gentle, pushing us slowly, inexorably toward the dark, hulking shape of the plateau on the western horizon. Occasionally, a soft splash breaks the stillness, a nocturnal fish jumping, or perhaps a crocodile sliding off a submerged mudbank. The sailors are clustered at the stern, resting after the brutal labor of loading. They do not speak loudly. The immense quiet of the night seems to forbid it. Instead, one of them begins to hum. It is a low, mournful tune, a melody as old as the river itself. Others join in, their voices blending in soft, varied harmonies. They sing of their villages far to the north or south, of the sweet taste of dates, of the longing for their wives and children. The song drifts across the dark water, a lonely human sound in the vast emptiness of the flooded valley. It is a song of patience, of enduring the long nights and heavy days, carried on the same gentle current that bears the silent white stone toward its eternal resting place. Dusk has fallen over Hayt el Ghurab, the lost city of the workers. After a long day of scorching sun and omnipresent white dust, the evening brings relief, a welcome shift for the senses. The narrow, grid-like streets, which by day were just endless corridors of brown mud brick, now fill with life and, more importantly, with the overwhelming scent of food. This is not the starvation diet of slaves. This is the aroma of royal generosity. Thick, satisfying smoke rises from hundreds of small hearths. The dominant note is freshly baked bread. Thousands of heavy, flat loaves made from coarse ground emmer wheat are finishing in clay ovens right now. Their aroma is warm, earthy, comforting. It is the primal smell of sustenance and safety. Underneath that, something richer, the fatty, smoky scent of roasting meat. Oxen, goats, sheep, hundreds of animals are slaughtered daily to feed this immense army of builders. The smell of sizzling fat dripping onto charcoal mixes with the sharp, pungent tang of garlic and onions simmering in great copper cauldrons full of thick lentil stew. A low hum of conversation fills the air. Men sit in small groups outside their cramped barracks, their bodies still aching from the day's toil, but their spirits are lighter now. They laugh, swap rumours from upriver, play games of senet on boards scratched hastily into the dirt. A clay jar of thick, nourishing beer is passed around. You can hear soft slurps and satisfied sighs. It is a time of rest, of regeneration. In this moment, surrounded by the smells of abundance, they feel cared for, integral parts of a great machine that feeds them as surely as they feed it with their labor. Let us drift closer to one of these fires. Sit down quietly in the shadows. Listen. There is a man here. His name is Nacht. He is a stonemason from a small village near Abydos, far to the south. His hands are rough, covered in thick calluses and half-healed cuts from flying stone chips. He is young, perhaps only 20 summers old, but his eyes hold a weary maturity. He is staring into the flickering orange flames, holding a half-eaten piece of bread forgotten in his hand. He is speaking softly to the man next to him, an older quarryman named Intef. The inundation should be peaking back home now, Nacht says, his voice thick with a sudden sharp longing. My wife, Merasank. She will be moving the goats to the high ground near the cliffs. It is hard work for her alone. He pauses, remembering the scent of her hair, which always smelled faintly of lotus oil, and the way his small son laughed when he chased the ducks by the river bank. The ache of their absence is a physical pain in his chest, a hollow space that no amount of royal bread can fill. But then he looks up. Over the low roofs of the workers' barracks, the massive dark silhouette of the pyramid looms against the starlit sky. It is gigantic, terrifying, magnificent. It is already higher than any hill he has ever seen. He points to it with his scarred hand. But look at it, Intef. Just look. Today, I set the corner casing stone on the 12th course. It was perfect. Not a hair's breadth of space between it and the next one. The overseer himself nodded at me. A slow smile spreads across his tired face, warring with the sadness in his eyes. My son, one day, his son's sons will stand here. They will look up at that mountain of white stone shining like the god himself, and they will say, my forefathers' hands helped build that. It will last forever, Intef. Forever. He takes a bite of his bread, the taste of ash and pride mingling in his mouth. The longing is still there, but it is tempered now by a fierce, quiet sense of purpose. He is not just Nacht from Abydos tonight, he is a builder of eternity. The fires burn down to glowing red embers. The conversations slowly die away, replaced by the sounds of drowsy murmurs and deep, heavy yawns. Sleep comes quickly here. It is not a gentle drifting off, but a sudden crushing weight that pulls men down onto their woven reed mats. They sleep everywhere, inside the crowded mud-brick galleries, on the flat roofs of the barracks, some even just curled up on the warm sand, wrapped in their rough linen cloaks. The noise of the vast camp fades into a symphony of snores, thousands of exhausted men breathing in unison. It is a deep, untroubled sleep, the kind that only comes from utter physical depletion. Above them, the Egyptian sky is incredibly clear. The stars are not distant pinpricks. They are fierce, blazing fires, hanging so low it feels like you could reach up and pluck them like ripe figs. The constellation of Orion, Osiris to them, the god of rebirth, strides across the southern horizon, watching over his sleeping children. A cool desert breeze wanders through the silent streets, carrying away the last lingering smells of smoke and sweat. For a few precious hours, there are no stones to move, no overseers to obey, no burning sun. There is only this deep, healing darkness. They rest, gathering their strength, for tomorrow the sun will rise again, and the mountain must continue its ascent to the heavens. As the years bled into decades, the plateau transformed. It was no longer a barren table of rock, but a hive of ceaseless, geometrically precise industry. And at its center, the great stone mountain rose layer by agonizing layer. How did they do it? How did they lift these titanic blocks, some weighing as much as a herd of oxen, hundreds of feet into the air? Even then, as it was happening, it was a marvel to behold. If you stood on the valley floor and looked up, you might have seen a colossal earthen ramp, a straight, massive causeway of packed rubble and mud brick, stretching from the quarry floor right up to the working face of the pyramid. It was a mountain in itself, growing alongside the stone one, constantly raised and lengthened as the pyramid grew taller. It was a brute force solution, a staggering expenditure of labor just to create the path for the stones. Or perhaps, if you look closer, you might have seen something more ingenious. Imagine a spiral ramp hugging the very sides of the rising pyramid like a great earthen serpent. It coiled upward, a narrow, perilous road clinging to the limestone skin of the monument. On this precarious path, teams of men would haul the blocks around sharp corners, higher and higher, constantly turning, constantly climbing toward the summit. Some even whispered of strange machines, not magic, but grand levers of cedar wood, massive counterweights, and intricate systems of ropes and pulleys that could hoist a block straight up the vertical face of a finished tier. We may never truly know which method dominated, or if they used them all in a grand, chaotic symphony of engineering. What we do know is the sheer scale of the effort. It was a daily miracle of physics. Every morning the sun would glint off a slightly higher peak. The ramp, whatever its shape, was swarming with tiny ant-like figures. They were pulling, pushing, sweating, defying gravity with every inch they gained. The dust from their passage rose in a perpetual plume, a hazy banner marking their unrelenting assault on the sky. It was a slow, grinding, magnificent ascent, a testament to the sheer, stubborn refusal of humanity to accept the limits of the earth. Imagine for a moment that you are one of the chosen few, a master mason perhaps, or a high priest, allowed to stand on the current summit of the unfinished pyramid. We are 400 feet up in the air now. The summit is not a point, but a flat, rough platform of colossal limestone blocks, littered with copper tools, coiled ropes, and pots of mortar. The wind up here is fierce. It whips at your linen kilt, tugging you toward the terrifying drop at the edge. It howls past your ears, drowning out the sounds of the chaotic world below. Look down. The bustling workers' city of Hayt el Garab, which felt so vast and all-encompassing when you were walking its streets, is now just a tiny grid of brown smudges on the desert floor. The thousands of men moving through, it looked like grains of sand shifting in an hourglass. Look east. The view is breathtaking. The entire Nile Valley is laid out before you like a living map. You can see the glittering ribbon of the river, a brilliant blue vein pulsating with life, winding its way north toward the distant spray of the delta. You can see the sharp, almost violent demarcation line where the lush green irrigated fields end and the stark, lifeless yellow of the desert begins. Life and death, side by side, separated by a single furrow of a plough. Far across the valley, on the eastern horizon, the limestone cliffs of Tura gleam white in the sun. The womb from which this very stone you stand on was torn. Look west. Nothing. Just the endless, undulating ocean of the Sahara, stretching out into infinity. It is a terrifying expanse of pure, untamed emptiness, a reminder of the chaos that always threatens to swallow the ordered world of Mart. Up here, suspended between the earth and the sky, you feel a strange sense of detachment. You are closer to the sun god Ra than any living human. You can almost feel the heat of his solar bark as it sails overhead. You understand, finally, why this mountain had to be built. It is the only fitting staircase for a god to begin his journey home. In this world of massive, brute stones, there exists a paradox, an obsession with microscopic precision. It is not enough to simply pile rocks toward the sky. That would be chaos. This monument must be an embodiment of Mart, cosmic order, truth, balance. It must be perfect or it is nothing. Walk with the master surveyors as they work in the hushed hours of the night. They do not use complex telescopes or brass instruments. Their tools are profoundly simple. A plumb bob, a mere stone hanging from a flaxen string, and a merk het, a simple notched palm rib used for sighting. They stand on the levelled bedrock, gazing north. They are watching the imperishable ones, the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, the eternal souls of the gods. They wait for hours, marking the exact rising and setting points of a single star on a specially built circular wall. By bisecting the angle between these 2 points, they find true north with an accuracy that is terrifying. The Great Pyramid is aligned to this celestial pole with a precision that modern surveyors, with all their lasers and satellites, still find humbling. It is off by only 3/60ths of a single degree. Now, look at the base. 13 acres of solid rock had to be leveled perfectly flat before a single block could be laid. How? They used water. They cut a grid of shallow trenches into the bedrock and filled them with water. Water, in its sacred obedience to gravity, always finds a perfect level. By measuring down from the water's surface, they could chip away the rock until the entire plateau was a flawless, shimmering plain. The greatest deviation from one corner to another, over a distance of 750 feet, is less than an inch. Think of that. Less than an inch of error across an area large enough to hold 10 modern football fields. Every block of fine white Chura limestone used for the outer casing was cut with similar obsessive care. The joints between them are so tight that you cannot slide a razor blade or even a human hair between them today. They were not just building a tomb, they were crafting a colossal piece of precision jewelry out of mountains of rock. It was an act of supreme devotion, a desperate, beautiful attempt to impose absolute, unwavering perfection onto a messy, imperfect world. In all this monumental undertaking, there was one task that struck fear even into the hearts of the king's most experienced engineers. It was not the millions of limestone blocks from the nearby quarries. It was the granite, red granite, the stone of kings, hard, unyielding, the colour of clotted blood. It came from only one place, Aswan, far to the south, at the very edge of the known world, 500 miles upriver. Imagine these blocks. Some of them, destined for the roof of the king's chamber, weighed over 50 tons. 50 tons of solid, dense rock. That is more than a herd of 100 full-grown oxen. Their journey was an epic in itself. First, they had to be torn from the bedrock, using fire, water, and balls of dolerite, pounded against the granite for months until it surrendered to human will. Then came the time of great fear, the loading. They waited for the absolute highest point of the Nile's annual flood. Special barges, gigantic constructions of Lebanese cedar, were moored at the riverbank, partially submerged with ballast stones. The granite colossi were rolled onto them down ramps of packed earth, inch by agonizing inch, hearts in throats. Every creak of the timber could mean catastrophe. Once the block was securely on deck, the ballast was removed, and the rising water would gently lift the barge. The voyage began, weeks of drifting with the current. These great, ungainly vessels, steered by massive oars at the stern, glided majestically down the center of the stream. They passed the temples of Luxor. They passed bustling cities and sleepy mud-brick villages. For the people on the banks, it must have been a nearly divine sight, mountains floating on the water. The crews of these barges were elite sailors, men who knew every whim of the river, every hidden sandbar, every treacherous eddy. Their task was to deliver the very heart of the pyramid, intact, across nearly 500 miles of waterway. It was the longest, most difficult and riskiest supply chain in the ancient world. We are now deep inside the beast. We are 150 feet above the desert floor, enclosed within a small rectangular space that will one day be the most sacred place on earth. This is the king's chamber. It is not like the rest of the pyramid, which is rough, dusty yellow limestone. This room is red. It is faced entirely with the polished granite from Aswan. In the flickering light of olive oil lamps, the walls seem to glow with an inner, sanguine fire. It feels less like a room and more like the interior of a living heart. The air here is thick, hot, and incredibly still. It smells of three things: the acrid smoke of the lamps, the metallic tang of dried sweat, and the underlying ancient scent of crushed rock. Look up. The roof is open to the dark sky above. But not for long. Waiting on the limestone platform just outside this red chamber are the beams, 9 majestic monoliths of granite. They are the largest single stones ever moved by human hands up to this height. Each one weighs as much as a whole obelisk. They are 50, 60, perhaps 70 tons of dead weight. The task ahead is terrifyingly simple and impossibly dangerous. They must slide these colossal beams across the open void of the chamber to form a flat ceiling. There is no room here for thousands of men to pull ropes. There is no space for grand ramps. There is only a narrow ledge, the sheer muscle of a chosen few elite teams, and the absolute necessity of silence. Listen to the quality of this silence. It is heavy, pressurized. In the quarries there was chanting. On the ramps there was shouting. Here there is only the sound of strained, desperate breathing. A foreman stands on the very edge of the granite wall. He does not shout. He signals with a single raised finger. 50 men, crammed into the narrow crawl spaces around the chamber, lean onto massive levers made of whole cedar tree trunks. Creak. The sound of the wood under this unimaginable pressure is sickening. It sounds like it is screaming. The great stone beam, resting on hardwood rollers that have been greased with animal fat, begins to move. It does not roll quickly. It shudders forward, barely an inch at a time. You can feel the vibration of its movement through the soles of your feet, a deep, grinding rumble that shakes your very bones. If it slips, even slightly, it will not just fall. It will smash through the intricate internal masonry they have spent years building. It will kill everyone in this room instantly. It could crack the very core of the pyramid. The men are slick with sweat. Their eyes are wide, fixed on the foreman's hand. Their muscles are locked in spasms of effort, holding tons of rock in check, fighting the terrible urge of gravity to pull it down, inch by inch, hour by hour. The grinding sound continues, granite scraping against wood, wood crushing against limestone. It is nerve-wracking, endless friction. Finally, with a sound like a grand, deep tomb door closing forever, the first beam slots into its designated notch on the opposite wall. Thud. The vibration stops. The silence returns, but now it is different. It is the silence of relief, but only for a moment. There are 8 more beams to go. They have just placed the first permanent seal on the Pharaoh's eternal sleep. They have created a sky of stone that must never, ever fall. There's one final piece of this puzzle, a detail often overlooked but crucial. Before that ceiling of massive granite beams could be slid into place, before the chamber was sealed forever from the light of the sun, something else had to be brought inside. The sarcophagus. It is a simple box, carved from a single block of chocolate-coloured granite, even harder and darker than the walls of the room. It is unadorned, stark, and terrifyingly heavy, and it is too big to fit through the narrow corridors that will eventually lead into this room. Think about that. It means the sarcophagus was not an afterthought. It was not brought in at the end, when the king died. It has been here all along. It was placed here when the pyramid was only half built, sitting open to the sky under the blazing sun and the silent stars. They built the king's chamber around it. For years, as the walls rose higher and higher, it sat there, a lonely, dark sentinel in the center of the growing void. It was wrapped in thick layers of linen and matting to protect it from falling chisels and dripping mortar. It was a constant, silent reminder to every worker who saw it of the ultimate purpose of all this labor. It is the seed around which the entire stone fruit has grown. It has been waiting here, patient and empty, for the day it will finally fulfill its solitary sacred purpose. The mountain of stone is complete. It stands now at its full, staggering height, a rugged, stepped pyramid of yellowish core masonry, reaching 481 feet into the brilliant blue sky. But it is not yet finished. It is like a body without its skin. Now begins the final, most delicate phase, the dressing. They start from the very top, from the gleaming, gold-plated pyramidion that now caps the summit, and they work their way down. The rough, stepped sides must be made smooth. The outer layer, those precise blocks of snow-white Tura limestone, must be polished to a mirror finish. It is a slow, painstaking revelation. Imagine 1,000 men clinging to the steep, 51-degree slopes like alpine climbers. They work with copper chisels, then with polishing stones made of hard quartzite, and finally with fine abrasive sands and leathers. Scrape, rub, polish. Day by day, foot by foot, a perfectly smooth, blindingly white surface begins to emerge from the top downwards. It is like watching a brilliant white curtain being slowly lowered over the monument. As they work, the sun catches this new surface. It is blinding, literally blinding. The polished white limestone reflects the fierce Egyptian sun with such intensity that it can be seen from miles away. It shines like a beacon, a second terrestrial sun. It is no longer just a mountain of stone. It is becoming Aiket, glorious light. Travelers coming from the delta, days before they even reach Memphis, can see it. A brilliant solitary star shining on the western horizon, even at midday. It is a sight that makes them drop to their knees in awe, a gleaming, undeniable testament to the God-King who commands not just the earth but the very light itself. The final stone, the capstone, the Ben. It is not like the others. It is smaller, a perfect pyramid in miniature, carved from a single block of hard, dark granite or perhaps fine white limestone. But it is not left bare. It is covered in electrum, a dazzling natural alloy of gold and silver. It sits at the base of the finished pyramid, waiting. It has been inscribed with powerful spells, prayers that will allow the Pharaoh's soul to use it as a launch pad to the stars. The day it is raised is a day of supreme holiness. There is no shouting now, no cracking of whips. The ascent is a solemn, hushed ritual. The finest team of riggers, men who have spent their entire lives moving stone, are given this ultimate honor. They use a special wooden scaffold, a delicate framework that inches the sacred stone up the final, impossibly steep slope. Pharaoh Khufu himself is there to watch. He stands below, a tiny mortal figure craning his neck toward the heavens he intends to conquer. Finally, it reaches the summit. With infinite care, it is lowered onto the flat platform at the very apex. It slots perfectly into place, completing the sacred geometry. The four triangular faces meet at a single, infinitely sharp point. Silence falls over the entire plateau. Tens of thousands of workers, priests, and nobles hold their breath. And then the dawn comes. The first ray of the rising sun, speeding across the eastern desert, strikes the tip of the pyramidion. Flash! A brilliant spark of pure golden light ignites at the very top of the world. It is blindingly bright, a sudden newborn star. As the sun rises higher, this light flows down the faces of the pyramid like molten gold. It is a moment of pure magic. The connection is made, earth and sky are linked, the machine is active. A great cry goes up from the multitude below, a roar of triumph, of relief, of utter, overwhelming awe. They have done it. They have touched the face of God. And then, slowly, like a great tide receding, they began to leave. The work was done. The mountain was finished. It did not happen overnight. It took months, perhaps years, for the vast city of workers to empty. The great machine of construction, which had roared for 2 decades, slowly wound down into silence. The sounds that had defined a generation, the tapping of chisels, the groaning of ropes, the shouts of foremen, began to fade one by one, like candles being snuffed out in a vast hall. Families packed up their few belongings, their worn sleeping mats, their blackened cooking pots, their small amulets of Bes and Taweret. They took one last look at the blinding white miracle they had built, a sight that would stay seared into their memories until the day they died, and then they turned away. They walked back down into the valley, back to their neglected fields, back to the villages that had half forgotten them. They returned to being farmers, fishermen, and potters. But they were changed. They carried the dust of the plateau in the creases of their skin and the pride of the impossible in their hearts. The vast barracks of Hayt el Ghurab stood empty. The wind began to blow through the deserted streets, piling sand in the doorways where children had once played. The cooking fires grew cold, their ashes scattered by the breeze. Silence, the ancient heavy silence of the desert, began to reclaim the plateau. But it was a different silence now. It was not the empty silence of before. It was a pregnant silence, a waiting silence. The Great Pyramid stood there, white and immaculate against the deep blue sky, watching them go. It was no longer a construction site. It was now a sacred precinct, waiting only for its final occupant, ready to begin its eternal vigil over the sands of time. The day has finally come. The king is dead. Long live the king. But in Egypt, death is not an end. It is a departure. And today is the day of the great journey. The procession begins at the royal palace in Memphis, crossing the Nile on a grand flotilla, and now it is here, moving slowly, solemnly up the long stone causeway that leads from the valley temple to the foot of the pyramid. Listen, it is not a sad sound. There is no wailing here, not for a god-king. Instead, there is a rhythmic, hypnotic pulse. It is the sound of hundreds of sistra, ritual rattles made of bronze and sacred faience. They are shaken by the priestesses of Hathor, a gentle, metallic, shimmering sound that is meant to ward off evil spirits and soothe the soul on its perilous voyage. Mingling with this is the deep, resonant chanting of the lector priests. They recite spells from the ancient texts, their voices low and steady, weaving a net of magical protection around the fallen Pharaoh. And the smell, it is overwhelming. Clouds of expensive incense billow from golden censers swung by shaven-headed priests. It is myrrh, bitter, resinous, and incredibly precious, brought from the distant legendary land of Punt. It is the scent of preservation, of immortality. It hangs thick in the still desert air, stinging your eyes and filling your lungs with holiness. In the centre of it all, carried on the shoulders of high courtiers, is the royal bark. It is not a real boat, but a magnificent stylized sledge shaped like the solar vessel of Ra. Upon it rests the anthropoid coffin of Khufu, gleaming with gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli. He is passing through his own necropolis one last time. He is moving toward the white mountain that he spent his life preparing, ready to enter the dark, narrow corridor that will lead him to his final, eternal rest in the red granite chamber. The procession reaches the entrance. It is high on the north face, a dark, rectangular mouth in the immaculate white limestone. Now, only a chosen few may enter, the high priests, the closest, family, the most trusted courtiers. They leave the sun, the blue sky, and the world of the living behind. They step into the belly of the stone beast. The air inside changes instantly. It is cool, completely still, and smells faintly of the dust of ages that has already begun to settle here. The path is difficult. First, they must descend down a narrow, steep corridor that seems to lead to the very core of the earth. Then, deep within the pyramid, they find the ascending passage. It is so low they must walk bent double, almost crawling, dragging the gilded coffin behind them on wooden runners. Torches cast flickering, dancing shadows on the smooth limestone walls. The sound of sandaled feet and scraping wood is unnaturally loud in this confined space. Every breath, every whispered prayer echoes. And then, suddenly the space opens up. They enter the grand gallery. It is a breathtaking sight even in this gloom. The corridor soars steeply upward, but the ceiling is lost somewhere high in the darkness, more than 26 feet above their heads. The walls corbel inward in 7 majestic, overlapping steps. It is a cathedral of stone hidden in the heart of the mountain. They walk slowly up the steep central ramp. On either side, along the walls, are regular slots, sockets for the great beams that may have once held the machinery used to hoist the blocking stones. At the very top of the gallery, a low, narrow antechamber awaits them. They must stoop again, passing under the stone portcullises that will soon drop forever. And finally, they enter the king's chamber. The red granite glows in the torchlight. The empty sarcophagus waits on the west side, open like a stone mouth. The journey of the body is over. Now the journey of the soul will begin. The rituals are finished. The prayers have been spoken. The king lies in his granite womb, surrounded by the treasures he will need in the afterlife. The mourners have retreated, their torches fading back down the long, dark corridors. Now comes the final act, the sealing. It is a mechanical process, cold and irreversible. High up in the grand gallery, colossal blocks of granite have been waiting for this moment, resting on wooden chocks. A team of workers, the very last men to ever stand this deep inside the monument, knocks the chocks away. Boom! The first block slides down the ramp. It is a deafening, grinding roar that shakes the entire internal structure. It crashes into the entrance of the ascending passage, plugging it perfectly. Boom! A second block follows, stacking behind the first. Boom! A third. The sound of these impacts is terrifying in the confined space. It is the sound of finality. It is the sound of a door being locked that will never, ever be opened again. The workers, now trapped on the upper side of the blocks, must escape through a secret, roughly hewn well shaft that drops down through the solid masonry to the lowest subterranean chambers, a desperate, choking scramble through pitch darkness to reach the exit. Behind them, silence returns to the king's chamber. Absolute, unbroken silence. The darkness is total. The air is still. Khufu is alone for 4,500 years, while empires rise and fall outside, while wars rage and cities crumble to dust. He He will lie here in this perfect, quiet dark, waiting for a morning that has already come. When the last priest turned his back on the plateau, and the last waft of incense faded into the dry air, the desert began its slow, inevitable reclamation. It did not attack violently. The desert has no need for haste. It has eternity. It began with the wind, the same wind that once cooled the sweating brows of the quarrymen, now carried a different cargo. Millions upon millions of tiny, abrasive grains of quartz. Listen to the sound of it. Hiss, shh, endlessly brushing against the glorious white casing stones. At first the stones were too smooth, too perfectly polished for the sand to find a purchase. It would strike the angled faces and slide off like water, pooling at the base, and that is where it started. A small, unassuming drift of yellow sand began to form against the lowest course of masonry. It was soft, warm, and seemingly harmless. But day after day, year after year, century after century, it grew. The drift became a mound, the mound became a dune. Slowly, relentlessly, a rising golden tide began to swallow the works of man. It crept over the paved causeways, burying the footprints of pharaohs under feet of shifting dust. It filled the offering basins where priests had once poured beer and water. It piled up against the temples, drifting through their doorways and filling their silent halls with deep, soft carpets of grit. The sharp, precise lines of human geometry were slowly softened by the undulating, organic curves of the dunes. The plateau was drowning in a slow-motion sea of sand. Great monuments that had once towered proudly above the bedrock now seemed to be sinking into it. The great Sphinx, the silent guardian of the East, was eventually buried up to its neck, leaving only its enigmatic, battered human head staring out across the endless sea of yellow. A stone king swimming in an ocean of dust, waiting patiently for a future that was thousands of years away. Even as the sand rose, the great white mountain did not stand entirely alone. It was watched. For centuries there were guards, men paid in grain and beer to patrol the perimeter, to keep the sacred ground inviolate. They would walk the high walls of the necropolis at night, their torches small, flickering islands of orange light in the vast ocean of darkness. But empires crumble, wealth fades, the guards became fewer, their pay less regular, their vigilance less keen. And then the shadows came. They did not come with the pomp of processions, but with the stealth of desert foxes. They were men driven by greed, by desperation, or perhaps by a cynical lack of fear for the old gods. Listen closely now. Can you hear them? The soft crunch of a sandaled foot on loose gravel, instantly stilled. The hushed, tense whisper of voices speaking a later form of the Egyptian tongue. The tink of a copper chisel striking stone, muffled by a thick piece of leather. They came at night, under the cover of the new moon. They knew the secrets. Perhaps they were descendants of the very workers who had sealed the tomb, passing down forbidden knowledge from father to son like a dark inheritance. They found the hidden entrance high on the north face, obscured by artfully placed stone blocks. They chipped away at the mortar, sweating in the cold night air, their hearts hammering against their ribs with every loud crack of the rock. They were not just breaking into a tomb, they were breaking a cosmic law. They were risking not just execution by the Pharaoh's living agents, but eternal damnation by the gods of the underworld. Yet the lure of gold, the gold they knew must be inside, piled high in the darkness, was stronger than their fear. They slipped inside like ghosts, leaving only scarred stone and disturbed dust to mark their passage, beginning the long, slow violation of the eternal rest. More than 2,000 years after Khufu was laid to rest, a different kind of visitor arrived on the plateau. He was not a worshipper nor a robber. He was a tourist. His name was Herodotus, a curious, inquisitive Greek from Halicarnassus. He stands there in the blinding Egyptian sun, a man in strange, draped foreign clothes, holding a wax tablet and a stylus. He looks up at the Great Pyramid, which is still covered in its gleaming white casing stones, though they are now weathered and pitted by the millennia. He is overwhelmed. The sheer scale of it defies his Greek sense of human proportion. It is a mountain built by giants. Beside him stands an Egyptian priest, a man with a shaven head and clean white linen robes. The priest is old, his face lined like a dried riverbed. He is speaking through an interpreter, gesturing grandly at the monument. Listen to the murmur of their voices, the harsh, guttural sounds of the Greek tongue clashing with the softer, more rhythmic cadence of late Egyptian. The priest is telling stories. He speaks of a wicked king who closed the temples and forced all Egyptians to work for him. He speaks of machines made of short wooden planks that lifted the stones from tier to tier. He speaks of 100,000 men working in 3-month shifts for 20 years. Herodotus scribbles furiously, his stylus digging into the soft wax. He does not know that half of what he is hearing is myth, legend, and folklore that has grown up over 20 centuries like moss on an old stone. He does not know that the true history, the complex logistical miracle of the Old Kingdom, has already been largely forgotten by the Egyptians themselves. He is just listening, eyes wide with wonder, recording the whispers of a past that is already ancient to him. He is the first of millions who will come, stand in this exact spot, look up and wonder, how? Why? The year is 1798. The sun is the same fierce, unrelenting disk that burned down on Khufu's architects, but the men standing beneath it now wear heavy wool uniforms of blue and red, sweating profusely in the alien heat. They are soldiers of the French Republic, an army of the Enlightenment stranded in the sands of antiquity. At their head stands a small man with a pale, intense face and eyes that seem to devour everything they see. General Bonaparte. He sits on his horse, gazing across the desolate, sand-swept plateau. The pyramids before him are no longer white and gleaming. They are stripped bare, their majestic casing stones long since stolen to build the mosques and palaces of Cairo. They are rugged, stepped mountains of brownish-yellow rock, eroded and scarred by time. Yet their power is undiminished. Around him, his troops are preparing for battle. The Mamluk cavalry, glittering in medieval armor, is massing on the horizon like a mirage from another era. Bonaparte turns to his soldiers. His voice, though not loud, carries a strange electric resonance in the still desert air. "Soldiers," he says, gesturing toward the silent stone giants. "Remember that from the summit of these pyramids 40 centuries look down upon you. 40 centuries. The phrase hangs in the air, heavy with the weight of history. For a fleeting moment, the young modern soldiers from Paris and Marseille feel it, the immense, crushing burden of time. They are not just fighting a battle today, they are standing on the stage of eternity, watched by the silent, indifferent eyes of the deepest past. The roar of the coming cannons will be just another fleeting sound, swallowed instantly by the ancient silence of the plateau. 50 years later, the soldiers are gone, replaced by a new breed of invader, the gentlemen explorers of the Victorian age. Men like Howard Vyse and Flinders Petrie come not with cannons, but with measuring tapes, theodolites, and an insatiable, almost feverish curiosity. Enter the pyramid with them now. It is no longer a sacred journey, it is an expedition. They wear heavy tweed suits and stiff collars, absurdly impractical for the stifling heat of the interior. They cough constantly in the thick, stagnant air, which is now choked with the acrid black smoke of their magnesium flares and sputtering tallow candles. Listen to the sounds they make. The sharp scratching of graphite pencils in leather-bound notebooks, recording measurements with obsessive precision. The tink-tink of small geological hammers chipping away at mortar to find hidden cavities. The sudden, booming echoes of gunpowder charges, yes, gunpowder, used by Vyse to blast his way through solid masonry in a brute force search for secret chambers. They crawl through the same narrow passages that the ancient priests once walked with such reverence. But where the priests brought incense and prayers, these men brought the harsh light of scientific inquiry. They are measuring eternity with inch tapes. They are trying to dissect the magic, to reduce the colossal mystery of the stones, to neat columns of figures and diagrams in Royal Society journals. Yet, even as they measure and blast, you can see it in their eyes, illuminated by the flickering torchlight, the same enduring awe that has gripped every human soul that has ever entered this dark, silent place. And now we arrive at today. The plateau is no longer a quiet, sacred necropolis. It is a circus of the modern world. Buses, massive creatures of steel and glass, belch diesel fumes into the air where incense once drifted. They disgorge armies of tourists in bright, mismatched clothes, clutching water bottles and glowing rectangular screens that capture pieces of the Pharaoh's soul in digital code. Vendors shout in a dozen languages, offering cheap plastic replicas of ancient gods and bumpy rides on tired camels adorned with garish tassels. The air is filled with the constant restless chatter of a global multitude, a chaotic babel of voices that never ceases while the sun is up. Yet, look past them. Look at the stones themselves. They do not care. The Great Pyramid stands amidst this swirl of frantic modern noise with an indifference that is terrifying in its absolute stillness. It has seen the workers, the priests, the kings, the robbers, the soldiers, the scholars. They all make their noise, they all have their brief moment in the sun, and then they all blow away like dust in the wind. Wait until the sun begins to set. The buses leave, the vendors pack up their wares, the shouting fades, the gates are locked, and the silence returns. It is the same heavy, profound silence that was there 500 years ago. The desert night wraps around the monuments once more, cool and protecting. The stars wheel overhead, the same imperishable ones that Khufu watched. In the end, the noise of our modern world is just another fleeting layer of sand, drifting momentarily against the base of an eternal mountain. The stone remains, it waits, it watches, and it will still be here, silent and supreme, long after we, too, have become just another whisper in its long, long memory. Let us come back now, return to where we began, standing on the cool sands of the Giza Plateau in the dead of night. The fog of history has lifted. The phantom smells of roasting meat and burning incense have faded, replaced once again by the dry, dusty scent of the modern desert. The rhythmic tapping of copper chisels is gone, leaving only the low, distant hum of Cairo on the eastern horizon. Look up one last time. The sky above you is the same sky that looked down on Hemiunu as he drew his first straight line on a fresh sheet of papyrus. The same stars are there, perhaps shifted slightly by the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, but still burning with the same cold, indifferent fire. Orion, the great hunter, the soul of Osiris, still stalks across the southern sky. The North Star still holds its seemingly fixed position, the pivot point around which the entire heavens appear to turn. You have travelled through 4.5 millennia tonight. You have seen the sweat, felt the ambition, heard the silence of the sealed tomb. Now, as you stand here in the 21st century, you realize that the true power of these monuments is not just in their size or their age. It is in their ability to collapse time. When you touch these stones, you are touching the hands that quarried them. When you look up at their majestic silhouette against the stars, you are sharing the exact same view as a pharaoh who believed he was a god. The circle is complete. The past is not a distant country. It is right here, solid and tangible, waiting for anyone willing to stand still long enough to listen to its quiet, enduring whisper. Do not worry about them. As you turn to leave, as you head back toward the lights and the noise of your own time, know this: they will be fine. They do not need our protection. They do not need our understanding. They only need to be let alone to continue their long, untroubled stone sleep. They have weathered earthquakes that shook cities to dust. They have endured storms that scoured the paint from lesser temples. They have watched civilizations rise like the Nile flood and recede just as surely, leaving only silt behind. They are the anchors of the world. While you sleep tonight in your soft bed, they will be here, standing tall in the darkness, holding up the sky. The wind will whisper around their massive corners. The sand will drift gently against their base. Sleep well. The guardians are at their post. Everything is as it should be. The silence is eternal. Shh. Listen to your own breath now. Slow, steady, deep. Let the image of the Great Pyramids fade gently from your mind's eye, like a dream dissolving in the morning light. They are safe in the desert. You are safe here. Let the heavy, comforting silence of the stones follow you into sleep. Let it wrap around you like a warm linen cloak. If you would like this quiet sanctuary to always be here for you, just stay subscribed to our little library and we will keep your chair waiting. Rest now, the work is done, the long day is over. Good night.